A buddy of mine messaged me. He was listening to our podcast on Monday when we were discussing the 50-50 and what would be kind of the hockey version of that.
Yep.
And he suggested a true Shohei equivalent in hockey, 20 goals, 20 assists, 20 starts in goal, all in one season, because Shohei as the pitcher and the hitter when he's healthy.
No, that's wrong. Like that is such an awful comparison.
Why?
Because those aren't pitching stats.
Well, of course it's not pitching stats. It's two different sports. I just thought it was a funny comparison.
No, but because
he plays both sides of the ball, that would be both sides of the puck.
Yeah, but he's not doing that this year in his 50-50 season.
No, I
understand. Not only are you dumb, but your friends are dumb.
My goodness.
I just want to say for the record.
This is terrible. Welcome to 32 Thoughts, the podcast presented by GMC. Dom Shamati, Elliotte Friedman, Kyle Bukoskis with you. We're all under one roof for the first time, the three of us, all together. Elliotte, we're in El Segundo, California. We're spending a few days with the LA Kings doing a handful of interviews as their training camp and preseason marches along. The big story, we'll get to all the hockey stuff in a minute here. Our pickleball game the other day, Elliotte.
Yeah, I had a feeling this was going to come up.
It was a barn burner.
Kyle's bringing this up because he whooped my tail. I will concede. You do play more pickleball than I do, but I still don't think it would have mattered. I concede defeat. I got beaten, but we will play again, and I will take my revenge.
I don't know if the beatdown can get any worse, but I look forward to it. We got a lot to get to here in today's episode. Jim Hiller, the head coach of the Kings, he'll be part of the interview we did with him. That'll be part of the episode today. The Thought Line is back again.
An expert bobber and weaver, Jim Hiller.
He had the shield put up firmly in the ground at certain points, but also got into a lot of great topics along the way, too. It was interesting. So we landed here Wednesday morning.
Yes.
With the time change still about mid-morning, and it was overcast, kind of stayed overcast most of the day, and I think back now, it was almost like an ominous sign because we're out for dinner Wednesday night. We're watching the LA Kings preseason game in Vegas. And what happens on Drew Doughty's, second shift?
Yeah.
Him and old teammate Tanner Pearson battling for a puck along the boards. His legs go opposite directions, and the left one digs in along there. And, man, it did not look good. Both of our hearts sunk as we watched it, as did Kings Nation. So on Thursday, the Kings just said that he was getting a lot more tests done. We still don't know the extent of the damage, how much time he's going to miss, but it sounds like this is an organization that's preparing, at least for the short term, of life without Drew Doughty.
So one of the things I think we do know is that there is a broken bone somewhere in there, and what they are trying to determine is if or how much, if there is, ligament damage occurs. And for anybody out there who's any kind of athlete or understands medicine, you almost prefer there to be the broken bone. You don't want the ligament damage. The ligament damage is a longer timeline. So I think that's what the Kings were doing on Thursday, is trying to determine the second part of that equation. If it's just a broken bone, you're probably looking at 6 weeks, maybe
4 to 6, I think. Yeah.
But 4 to 6 weeks, and you can manage that. If it's ligament, it's longer. Like, one of the things I was starting to do was look at, okay, what right-handed D are still out there? Like, there's a Justin Schultz, there's a Kevin Shattenkirk, and of course, there's going to be situations where waivers or someone becomes available. But I'm not sure the Kings are going to look into anything like that until they have a better idea. And I'm assuming that update will come on Friday after they skate on Friday at home. But that's kind of where they are. But it's interesting in the interview, which you'll hear, Hiller talks about how the veteran players on the Kings, you could tell by the reaction on the bench how disappointed and upset they were for Doughty to see him get hurt so quickly and suffer such a painful injury during the preseason. You know, it's funny. Like Hiller was asked, "Do you regret playing Doughty?" And I completely understand the question. If I was in there, I would be asking the same question. But it's almost like a trap,
right?
In the sense that you have to play guys in the preseason, but it's the absolute worst case scenario. I don't know what you can do to protect against it. It was a fluke play on the second shift of the game.
Yeah. And so now, assuming they've got to go for a while without Doughty, if it's not going to be externally where they look for filling the void, I guess Kyle Burroughs, a guy who they signed, was in San Jose last year. He ended up playing a ton of minutes the other night against Vegas after Doughty left. Everyone's going to be looking at Brandt Clarke as a guy who's expected to be a full-time regular player this year and to take a big step. Who are you looking at in terms of how they go about sorting through this as long as he's out?
So whoever moves to Doughty's spot, you assume will play with Mikey Anderson, right?
Yes.
Because that's the regular number one pair. The first name I thought of was Brandt Clarke, actually. But one of the reasons, Kyle, they went out and they got Joel Edmondson was they wanted him to play with Clarke. So it doesn't sound to me like they want to break up the Edmondson-Clarke idea. And I think also, while they seem pretty excited about Clarke, I think they have a plan for the way this wants to work. And, you know, they don't want to vary from it. You know, what's the old Mike Tyson line? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Well, the Kings got kind of punched in the face here, but I think they want to keep this the way it is. So I think Burroughs is the guy who makes a lot of sense. They also have Jordan Spence here. I wonder if they'll try the idea of someone who shoots left, like Gavrikov playing on the right side.
Yeah, they may not have a choice.
They may not have a choice, but the interesting thing about that is, like Jim Hiller is a guy who coached with Mike Babcock, and Babcock's feeling about this was you could do that 10 or 15, 20 years ago, but the game is too fast to do that now. So I'd be curious to see if he decides to do that, but I got to think in the short term, Burroughs is probably going to get a chance to be that particular guy. But again, it determines how long do they find Doughty to be out. You know, the other thing that should be mentioned about this is that there was some debate about whether or not Drew Doughty is still a Team Canada guy for the Four Nations face-off. I don't think there's any doubt in the Canadian staff's mind. I think that they really do feel like Drew Doughty is going to be someone who's on their team, and as long as he's healthy enough to play, he is going to be on their team.
Yeah, and we heard that's still a big deal for Drew as well.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I guess once he got onto the table there in Vegas when they helped him off the ice, the first question was just how long, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's still be in fairly good spirits through it all, but that's the question for him going, how long is it going to be?
How long? And you know that he's one of those guys, if they say 8 weeks, I'll be back in 4.
Yeah.
They're going to have to drag him away from the ice to prevent him from competing. So right now, as we sit here and record this podcast from the Kings' beautiful podcast studios here in El Segundo, which they were gracious enough to let us borrow, you're hoping that it's just bone and not ligaments, and that's still what they're trying to determine. And, you know, this is something else, too. It could determine big parts of the Western Conference playoff race.
And we wish Drew Doughty a speedy recovery. We hope to see him on the ice again soon. So, Elliotte, you and I and Dom, we're going to be here in SoCal until Saturday. We're actually going to go out and watch the Kings and Ducks play in Ontario, home of the Ontario Reign, the Kings American Hockey League affiliate team, on Saturday. The Kings actually don't play any preseason games at Crypto.com Arena, their home building, because the arena is still being renovated. They actually start the season 7 straight games on the road before coming back and playing their home opener. So they've got a bit of a grind coming out of the gate. We're going to talk more about their team in general, what the future looks like for the Kings on Monday's pod, along with another interview with Quentin Byfield. But Elliotte, we just came back from Dodger Stadium on Thursday night. We watched the Dodgers clinch the National League West Division against their rival San Diego Padres. Shohei Ohtani was doing his thing again, went 3 for 5, the go-ahead RBI. They had a big 7th inning, 5 runs they tacked on, and that ended up being enough to take the division. What were your takeaways away from that? Have you ever watched Shohei Ohtani in person before?
No, this was the first time I'd ever seen him in person. And the biggest takeaway I had is the electricity. Like you think about Los Angeles, what an epic generational run Los Angeles has had, from the Showtime Lakers to Wayne Gretzky to Shaq and Kobe to Mike Trout, even though unfortunately they never won anything with him there, to LeBron James, and now this. Like, think about what it's been like over the past 40 years to be a Los Angeles sports fan. Most of that time, you had a generational player entertaining you on an almost daily basis. And the thing that surprised me in this one tonight was when they won and clinched the division, their celebration was kind of muted. But every time Ohtani came up, that place was alive. And he had big hits in their win over the Padres on Wednesday night. He had the go-ahead RBI in this one tonight. But you can just sense it. Like, every time that guy comes up, people are expecting something special. And he's just on one of those runs now where he always delivers. It was a real highlight to go see him this evening.
And the thing about LA too, Elliotte, they do a tremendous job of recognizing and celebrating the moment. There was also a moment in Toronto tonight between the Maple Leafs and the Canadiens. Nick Robertson and William Nylander on the back check. Robertson doing something we've seen countless times in the game. The little extra boost from the back to try to help Nylander speed up, and it went completely haywire. The stick into the back of Nylander, he wipes out into Christian Dvorak, I believe, of Montreal, left the game, did not return. Now, Craig Berube very quickly post-game saying it's going to be fine, there's nothing to worry about. Even John Tavares suggested that he saw him afterwards, no reason to be worried. What did you think of all that there?
It was similar to what we talked about before with Doughty in the sense of cause and effect. Like, that's the kind of play I've been on the air when people have been praised, or it's been kind of laughed that someone tried to make that play, and then tonight it just goes horribly wrong. You're right. They're lucky that it doesn't appear to be that bad for Nylander. And it's funny. I did get a text tonight from a coach who said that there are people before who felt that that is a horrible play and they don't want their players doing it for that exact reason, that you can throw a guy off who's not expecting it. I'm glad for Nick Robertson, considering the offseason that he had, that it didn't turn out to be a disaster and he came back to score a goal later in that game. Because if Nylander had been really hurt or Robertson hadn't come back and had the big goal later in the game, that would have been the complete focus for the next couple of days. And that's the last thing he needs. It was kind of a weird game for Toronto in the sense that, you know, Nylander got hurt, Tavares got hurt, and Matthews didn't even play. Now, I don't think they're worried at all about this Matthews injury. I think it's just something that, you know what, we're in exhibition games. He's not going to play. There's no need for him to play. I'm sure some of these teams are looking at anybody who's even remotely nicked up, especially with what happened to Doughty, and they're like, we're not going to do anything with these guys. We're not taking any chance. And the other thing, too, is I'm a little surprised, Kyle, in the opening week of the exhibition season, how much there's been a freak out about injuries. For example, in Ottawa, Ullmark played his first game, and we'll get to that in a second, but they've been very careful with Norris. Zub has been out, and, just like we're still 2 weeks before we play for real. So I think, the way I look at it now is, as long as these guys are playing by next week, it's okay. No need to overreact yet, Ottawans. Now, if it's next week none of these guys are playing, then you have reason to panic.
Right.
But I don't think you do yet. Now, the one thing about Zub is I'm under the impression they don't think it's that serious. Okay. So that's good news for them. Like the same thing with Sorokin in the Island. Like Patrick Roy said the other night he's not sure what's going to happen in the preseason. Again, I'm more worried about this if this is happening next week as opposed to this week. And Ullmark answered a lot of questions by coming out hot and making 28 saves. Like, I have to tell you, Ottawa didn't put a great lineup out there, but all of Buffalo's players are overseas.
Right.
Like, there is no excuse.
Yeah.
Even in the first week of the preseason,
They needed kind of
shot 41-16 by that Buffalo lineup.
Right. They almost needed special exemption for the lineup that they dressed, right? Because of the fact that their NHL group was overseas.
I've seen, Dom made a good point, our producer, the way Travis Green looked after that game. That was very Vancouver Travis. We saw that look on his face before in Vancouver. He basically challenged a lot of those guys by saying it was going to be their last. Some of them was going to be their last game in Ottawa because cuts are coming. That was again, I don't overreact to the first week of preseason, but I'm sure they were hoping for a better performance from everybody not named Ullmark in that game. But hopefully Ullmark answered a lot of questions. He was really good.
Who's not worried about being wrapped in bubble wrap? Matt Dumba.
So they have that big rivalry, Stars Wild.
Right. And he was hated in Dallas.
And he was hated. I cannot think of a better way to say, hey, I'm on your team now than the 50-foot run he took in the exhibition game the other night. And there are players who think that veterans, like a guy like Devin Shore, who's a veteran player, shouldn't be hit like that in preseason games. Dumba was like, I do not care.
Yeah.
Way to introduce yourself to Dallas, because I have no doubt there were Stars fans who were like, Matt Dumba? Really?
Yeah.
Really?
I think right at the outset of free agency, right? Did they not sign on July 1st?
Yeah.
I was like, are you kidding me?
Yes.
This guy?
Yes. And there's no better way to ingratiate yourself into a new fan base than what Dumba did in that game. And the other team I noticed too was San Jose. Like, it's obvious that, if Smith or Celebrini, if someone even looks at them in the wrong direction, they've got Giovanni Smith, they've got some other guys there, they've got Klim Kostin there, who's no shrinking violet either. San Jose this year, they sent some messages that if you try to rough up our kids, hey, it wouldn't surprise me if Mike Brière ripped off the suit and put on some equipment. He still looks like he can kill some people out there.
I should ask, because we do every podcast and we'll continue to until it's done. Jeremy Swayman?
I didn't hear anything different as of now. And, we should talk about Shesterkin a little bit too, because it's been a big topic this week. We touched on it last week. That, again, I believe that one of the reasons they've told Trouba this will be it is because they've got some big extensions to do. Shesterkin, I think they're going to sign him. I do. To me, everything that's come out this week is all about the Rangers saying there's no need to panic here. We are signing this player. We are making him the highest paid goaltender in the NHL. We recognize his importance to us. We know he's the backbone of this team, and we are signing this player. This is now all about the number.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know what this number is going to be. There's been a lot of reporting. It's going to be 12, 12.5, 11.5. Ultimately, the one advantage the Rangers have is they have the 8th year.
Right.
So if Shesterkin doesn't sign there, he's going to lose a year at a very big number. That is the one thing the Rangers have in their power. But to me, and this week, everything that's come out this week proves it, they're signing him.
Mm-hmm.
They're signing him. It's just a matter of what that number is going to be.
Because if you're the Rangers, you got to think you got a chance at winning again this year. And with that, not wanting any distraction beyond what you can't control has got to be a huge priority for you too, to keep the focus on the ice because of what they believe this team is potentially capable of doing.
I don't think he'd be bothered by it. I mean, you're right. Like, to me, it's tougher if you're in Canada. Like, even though New York is the biggest media market in North America and one of the biggest in the world, I don't think a player like Shesterkin, who, he's not one of those guys who talks every day. He's not one of those guys who plays every day, even though he plays a ton. And, if it was Aaron Judge, it would be everywhere, every day. It's not quite that for Shesterkin in the States as it would be if he played in Canada. I don't think he's going to be a guy, I could be proven to be totally wrong. I don't think he's a guy that's going to be bothered by this. And the other thing too is I always remember Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky, his first big deal in Columbus, he told them he wasn't going to talk during the season. And then he signed a big extension like in December. So I always think that a team can go to an agent and say, look, I know you said you won't talk to us during the year, but we think we can get this done now. And so I think in Shesterkin's head, the agent could tell Shesterkin, we're not talking during the year, go focus, and you can say, all right. But that doesn't mean the team can't go. And then the agent can come to the player later and say, guess what? The team's ready to make a deal. And then the player will do it. So I always remember that Columbus-Bobrovsky thing. But again, to me, this whole situation reeks of the Rangers are doing this. It's just a matter of what the number is.
And some other goalie news too, Elliotte, that just came down as we're recording here on Thursday out of Anaheim, just down the way. John Gibson underwent emergency appendectomy surgery Wednesday night, expected to be out 3 to 6 weeks.
What's with all the appendectomies, Caden Gooley?
He had his appendix removed, and now John Gibson.
First of all, hope he's okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever had your appendix removed?
No, not that I know of. Have you?
Not that I know of. Was taken from you and sold on the black market without your knowledge.
Yeah.
No. My sister did, but I didn't. Just wild to be happening at the start of the season. Boy, that's a really tough one for Gibson. Simply because, as everybody knows, Gibson and the Ducks, they're trying to work on something, and this is only going to make it even harder. So hopefully he's okay, and really terrible, terrible timing for him.
We wish him the best as well. Ian Clark and the Vancouver Canucks, Elliotte, did you want to add a bit?
I mean, that one's starting to pick up a little bit of noise. I think that it's known that, Clark may move on with the Canucks' blessing. I think they're not going to stand in the way here if an opportunity opens for him. New Jersey already has like a goaltending department. But he knows Jacob Markstrom well. So we'll see, where some of these situations kind of move to. But, I think people who followed that situation much closer than I have, they really felt that it was likely that, after it was decided that, Clark couldn't go on ice, every day, this season for his own health because of injuries he suffered, that, maybe this marriage wouldn't continue. And I'm curious to see where it's going to go because even though it looks like the relationship between Clark and the Canucks have kind of turned in a bad direction, he's a really sharp guy who really knows goaltending. And he really played a huge role in Thatcher Demko getting to be who he is and where he is. So I think teams would definitely value that kind of institutional knowledge.
So let's go to Philadelphia next, Elliotte. Alexei Kolosov, their young goaltending prospect. We talked about a few years ago how it did not seem very promising, the idea of him coming over to Philadelphia. It looked like he was going to stay back home in Russia. There was talks about would the Flyers trade him and the other teams that would be acquiring him. Do they think they had a chance in bringing him over? It sounds like that's all been avoided. He is going to come to Philly. How did the Flyers and Kolosov sort all of this out?
A friend of mine said that Daniel Brière should be named ambassador to Russia because he seems to be able to solve a lot of problems here. Mishkov, Fedotov, and now Kolosov. Now, the bottom line is Kolosov has a contract. And, I think in all of our lives, unless you have a really good reason, if you sign a contract, then you have to live up to the terms of it, right? So Kolosov has a contract. From what I heard, and I haven't spoken to him, but I heard that he really thought he may have a better path to the NHL than maybe what was shown at the end of last year or he thought was possible this year. But the bottom line is a signed contract. And the NHL feels very strongly that even though it doesn't have all of the agreements, you do have to honor each other's contracts. So I think Kolosov kind of realized that that's the case. This was brewing over the last couple of days, but one of the things about the Flyers is that they're very careful about saying anything, because until he actually gets on the plane to come, you just never know what's going to happen. But he's on his way back. I believe he's going to play exhibition games. I believe he's going to play for the American Hockey League team to start the year, unless something happens, like an injury or something that gets him in the NHL right away. To me, the biggest question is, and a number of these players have it, is the European assignment clause. And, there's some players, they have it at the beginning of the season. There's some players who agree not to put it in there until a certain part of the year. Like, I'll play in the AHL till, say, for argument's sake, December 15th, and then I'll go back if I'm not in the NHL yet. I believe there's some kind of understanding here that there will be an option open to him if he's not in the NHL by a certain time. But the best thing he can do is show up and play well, because that's the only thing, or the best thing, that will get him to the National Hockey League.
How is Daniel Brière's, reputation building around the league, like amongst their general managers? Like, he's had to wade his way through a number of issues here coming out of the gate, and he seems to have got through a lot of it quite well.
Yeah, I think he's done a really good job. I think he's got a good reputation. Like, I think one of the things about Brière, and we talked about him, we had him on this podcast once, is that, he went up through the ECHL and he did a lot of business work too. He put in the work, and I would bet that doing that kind of helps you prepare for different things. If you've ever ran a company or been a manager in a company, you know that things go haywire on you all the time. So how do you adapt to that? And clearly, that Flyers front office, like, navigating Russian players, like, there's teams that don't want any part of it now. And there's teams that will do it, but they're afraid of it. The Flyers seem to have a real skill at it. And the one thing that really stands out more than anything else is Mishkov basically making it so that he would end up in Philadelphia. That's a big feather in their cap. This one's a little different. The Flyers had to take a harder line. They had to battle. Fedotov's situation was kind of out of their hands for a while. This is one where it was in their hands, but it wasn't. But the point they had to make was, we can't bend. And they didn't bend, and for now, they've got the player coming over.
So another file that the Flyers have to sort through is Ryan Johansson.
Yes.
So in August, they put him on waivers for purpose of terminating his contract. They did that, and as many expected, it was this week, Ryan Johansson and his camp, they filed a grievance about it all. So what can you tell us about where things stand there?
Yes, so the Players Association announced that they had started the grievance. They had 60 days. And it's interesting, the reaction to this one. And like I said, and I've said since the beginning, the source of this dispute is that this is a player who didn't miss games or practices when he was in Colorado, and he came and was traded to Philadelphia, and all of a sudden it became an issue. And that was the source of the dispute between the two teams. Now, the one thing I always say, and you have to be very careful about, is that, anybody who's played 900 NHL games like Johansson does, they're going to have wear and tear. So I never like to question injuries. There was one thing I did say on the pod, I think it was before you took over, Kyle, so you don't have to take any blame for it. It's solely on me, is that when Philadelphia announced the waivers and the termination, it was just after his wedding and he was dancing. And, I had some people say to me that may have been one of the reasons for the timing. And I had someone call me, and he said he didn't think that was fair. And he was more mad at me than he was at Philly or anyone else. He said that, there's a big difference between trying to battle Anja Kopitar and dancing at your wedding. And he didn't like the correlation, and he didn't like that I brought it up in that way. And so I said, you know what, when I get the chance to talk about it, I'll mention that. And he said he thought that was fair. Like, his just point was that you can get injured in the NHL and not be able to play in the NHL, but it doesn't mean you're completely incapable of doing some things like that in your life. So that's what the source of this dispute is going to be about when they go into the grievance process. I always think everybody wants to try to settle this if they can. Neither side likes an arbitrator creating precedents. They really try to avoid that, so I always think they try to settle it. But we'll see where it goes. I think it's going to come down to when Johansson saw doctors, what did they say?
Right.
And the answers from those doctors will determine who ends up winning or losing or settling this particular grievance.
Okay. So do you know what the next step is in all of this?
Now they have to set the arbitration, but I'm assuming there will still be attempts to settle.
Okay. Anything else you want to touch on in Philly while we're there?
Mishkov,
okay,
goal and assist on Thursday night. This is going to be, we've talked about it a little bit in the past. If you had to place a wager on Calder, and I said you could, if I was going to give you, say, $50 and say you can place a wager on Calder, and I'll give you Celebrini, I'll give you Mishkov, I'll give you Hudson, because I could be forgetting someone, just in case I'm forgetting anyone. But if I was going to give you that money right now out of the Rogers Petty Cash Fund, who would you bet it on?
Only giving me 50?
Yeah. I don't want you to bet something that you're uncomfortable about losing.
Yeah.
And also, if I take more than $50 from the Rogers Petty Cash Fund, they might notice it.
Right. That's a good point. I will take Mishkov simply because the opportunity to put up numbers, and that is a big deal when it comes to the Calder voting.
You know what I can tell about that guy right away?
Mm-hmm.
The Flyers players really like him.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they can all really communicate with each other yet. I've heard that when they practice, you can tell there's a lot of gesturing, that they're trying to talk hockey to each other. I don't know how good his English is yet, but the one thing you can really tell watching them play is they really seem to like playing with them. And he really likes playing with them.
Yeah. Igor Zamula has a heavy workload this year, playing and translating.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think right now Mishkov would be my guy, but I'm looking forward to the Calder race this year.
Yeah, should be a lot of fun. Winnipeg, Elliotte, Cole Perfetti. The contract stalemate is over there. 2-year deal, $6.5 million in total. Perfetti, you could tell, just some relief and going, that's behind us. Now I can worry about playing again. Were you surprised that it went as long as it did? We've talked about this for a number of podcasts here now since we came back to start the year. But were you surprised that it was still going into the second week of camp?
First of all, correction. I think the biggest news in Winnipeg this week was Sean Reynolds getting a haircut.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, how did we forget that?
That's right. He didn't just get a haircut. He took an axe to that. But
do you think it was in relation to your himbo comment?
Yes. I went on the Kenny and Rennie show, and I kind of got the impression it absolutely was. I thought he looked great, but yeah, I guess, Sean.
I thought so too.
Kind of weak, back down for criticism. Anyway, Perfetti.
But it wasn't criticism.
It wasn't criticism.
Go ahead.
He looked great.
Yeah.
Perfetti, this was one that had to happen because I think everybody knew there was a chance it was going to go off the rails. I thought the timing was very important.
Like, what does off the rails look like here?
To me, off the rails is, hard feelings really seeping in. And it's higher than Winnipeg wanted to go, and it's probably not as high as Perfetti and his camp wanted to go, but it's a good number. It's 2 times 325 is a good number. It's funny. Like, one GM reached out to me and he said, like, if you keep on bringing up Pinto, said if I wanted to really bring up a hard line, I would come back at you with Philip Tomasino, because Philip Tomasino in Nashville worked him really hard. He signed for $825. And, if you look at his numbers aren't that far from Perfetti. And we laughed and we said this was, me and the GM, we laughed and we said that I'm probably more worker-friendly because I'm a worker, and he's probably more management-friendly because he's a manager. And he said, you're lucky I'm not negotiating your deal. And I said, we'd have a holdout. That's what we would do. Actually, you're not supposed to use the phrase holdout anymore. You're supposed to say unsigned, because it's true. You don't have a contract. But I just thought it was fine. To me, it was Cole Perfetti wants to be a Jet. I don't ever believe in this conversation. A long-term deal was on the table. But I think Perfetti is happy there, and I think the Jets know that. And eventually, and also, too, the agent knows that. Eventually, you reach a situation where you've got a point of diminishing returns in terms of the relationship between team and player, particularly for a player who's in his first negotiation like this one. It's always better, get the deal done. It's better for both sides to be a little bit unhappy than for one or both to be extremely unhappy, and good on the Jets and the agent for realizing that.
Okay, did you see the news in your neighborhood this week? The new outdoor stadium that Live Nation plans to build just outside Toronto, Downsview Park area.
Well, it's in Toronto. It's just not in downtown Toronto.
Right, sorry, that's what I meant. 50,000 seats. They hope to have it open by next summer, so an aggressive timeline there. It's going to be called Rogers Stadium, naturally. You have a theory. About...
How many? We're going to have to find different names to name things. We got Rogers Center, Rogers Arena,
Rogers Place.
Like, who is the person at Rogers who is in charge of the thesaurus? Oh, we put our name on another one.
Yes.
Here's what we're going to call it. I think this is where Oasis is actually supposed to play next year.
Come on.
No, I think that someone was actually saying that to me today, that they think that the Oasis tour might end up in...
so it's meant to be a concert venue.
It's meant to be but the first thing I thought of, because my brain always turns to sports, is I wonder if they're going to try to put an outdoor game there.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Toronto's already had one. They had it. It was a really good one against Detroit. That was at BMO Field, where the soccer team and the Argos now play.
Right.
But, that is an area of the city where there is room to park. There is transit there. I've heard that telecoms like to make money. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that. I wonder if that's got outdoor game possibility on it.
What was your favorite outdoor game that you've been to?
That's a great question. The first one between Edmonton and Montreal, just because it was the first one. But the other ones I would name Michigan Stadium. Obviously the released Red Wings. That was a great outdoor game. Buffalo, Pittsburgh, because it was the first one they kind of tried. That was a great outdoor game. Wrigley Field, just because I love the Cubs.
Yes.
That was a great outdoor game. I've liked most of them. Like, I have to say this, a lot of the time you kind of go to, I went to I think the first 18. I actually counted this once. I think I went to the first 18. And then you're kind of like, oh no, another one of these again. But then when you go there, you get caught up in the excitement and the thrill of it. And people have, I didn't go to Nashville, Dallas. When I watched that on TV, I wished it was there, because the people there looked like they were having a great time with the pig races.
That's right.
And the walk of shame for Corey Perry when he got kicked out of that game. Like, every time I watch one of these on TV, I kind of wish I was there, because people look like they're always having a great time.
All right, that'll take us to the final thought presented by GMC. It was announced earlier on Thursday, Elliotte, from overseas in Germany, that Rasmus Dahlin has been named the new captain of the Buffalo Sabres. Alex Tuch, Dylan Cousins, Matthias Samuelsson, Tage Thompson will be rotating through as the assistants. This seems like a fit. First overall pick in 2018. Seems like he had started to becoming more comfortable in his skin over the years, having more and more of a presence, both publicly And with how that room was ran, what was your reaction when you heard Dahlin was the next captain in Buffalo?
To me, the choices were Dahlin, Tuch, or Thompson. Like, it was one of those three guys who I thought was going to be the next one. And I can't argue with the pick of Dahlin at all. I think it's a great pick. You know, one of the reasons I really like Dahlin as a pick is, and actually all three of these guys have this in common, it wasn't the easiest road for all of them. They kind of struggled at times early in their careers. I mean, Thompson was basically all but labeled a bust, and they picked themselves up off the mat, and they became really important players. I really like the choice of Dahlin. I mean, you could tell in the limited amount of times I've been around him. Like, some guys have it. Mm-hmm. He's got it. But the other thing, too, is when you watch teams practice, you can tell, like, who are the better practice players? How do teams relate to certain players? Do they, is it someone they respect? Is there someone they don't respect? And it's pretty clear that Dahlin's got a lot of the respect. And, the other thing, too, is he's their highest paid player. And, I really do think that in a lot of cases, your highest paid player, if he's not your captain, should be the most formidable part of your roster. And because I think if he's not, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And I just think that he's the perfect choice for that reason. I think I can't fault this at all. I'll tell you this, like, I'm always interested too, like, in who goes around him. Like Cousins, who's gotten his sharing an A, he's in the same group. Samuelson, who's sharing an A, he's kind of in the same group. Like, this Buffalo team, they got to make the playoffs this year. This is a huge, huge year for them. And one of the things I really like that the Sabres have done here is they've basically said to their young core, 4 out of the 5 of you are getting letters. If there's any doubt, it's your team.
Right.
It's your team.
Yeah, really good. New era in Buffalo, in a sense, bringing back Lindy Ruff again, the expectations to make the playoffs, and Rasmus Dahlin leading the charge as the new captain. That was the final thought presented by GMC. When we come back, the thought line and our conversation with Jim Hiller, the head coach of the Los Angeles Kings. Plenty more still to come. Stay tuned. Listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Okay, Elliotte, time now for the Thought Line. A reminder, the number to call, 1-833-311-3232. The email address, if you would like to write in, 32thoughts@sportsnet.ca. A lot of great entries this week, Elliotte, from all over, not just North America, but the world here. We're very fortunate how many people take time to reach out to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please keep doing it. Let's go.
We will begin with Eric in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Good day, Elliotte and Kyle. I listened to the September 20th podcast, and Riley from Saskatchewan asked when music started in the hockey fan experience. I have an article that references an old newspaper publication in 1867 in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, near Halifax, that a hockey game was played between the Army and Navy with about 1,500 fans and a large band. He even attached the article. So I wanted to bring this up because I hope, like, by the end of the season, we get an entry being like, not long after the Roman Empire. Like, it just keeps going further and further back. But it's great that our listeners...
The pride of Dartmouth. They're saying, wait a sec. Mm-hmm. Kyle's a moron for suggesting that it was Chicago, and we're going to prove he's a moron by bringing in contemporary articles that say it was 1887 in Dartmouth. Ladies and gentlemen, please continue to submit questions that show that Kyle is dumb.
That's not hard. That's not a hard thing to do. But we thank Eric from that, and I wanted to include that because it sets up our next submission. Mr. X from Parts Unknown, just for you.
Someone who's listening.
That's right.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I like that. Good on you, Mr. X, whoever you may be.
Kyle and Elliotte, The question last week about the first music in arenas got me wondering, if you were a player and had to choose your own goal song, what would you choose?
So one of my favorite songs, I believe I used to use this as my music during radio hits in both Vancouver and Nashville, is It's the End of the World and We Know It by REM.
Oh, wow. Great.
I love that song. I thought it was great entrance music for me personally. So that would be my tune. What's yours?
Well, the idea of you scoring a goal at any level of hockey is a sign that the world is ending. So that's very fitting.
I still remember my first one.
Really? How old were you? What was the scene?
I think I was in Pee Wee, because I played defense a lot. And so I wasn't, back then, like there was like a cord on your neck that didn't let you over the red line. And I wasn't the most aggressive kid, I will say. I was a bit of a soft kid, unfortunately. But I was playing wing, and somebody, one of the better players on our team, a guy named Sean Atkins, who passed away a few years ago, but was a really good player. He had a good shot. He missed the net, and it banked off the backboards and came out the other side of the net where I was, and the goalie couldn't get there fast enough, and I jammed it in. I still remember it.
That's awesome.
My teammates cheered in disbelief that I'd actually scored.
I'm happy for you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I could sense the happiness.
No, it's those core memories, right? It's fun when they get brought up again. I'm going with Everywhere by Michelle Branch, the chorus in particular. When
really?
That hits, yes, that'll get the crowd going.
I didn't know you were a Michelle Branch type.
She had some great hits back in the day.
She really belted out. Yep.
Okay, we'll go to a voicemail next.
Hey guys, it's Shafiq from Calgary calling here. And I had a quick question for you regarding training camps and PTOs in particular. So I'd love to know how exactly the compensation works for players who are assigned PTOs this time of year. And that was it. Last but not least, keep up the great work, guys. Thank you for making the drive to school much more tolerable. Take care.
So this was a question we've got a few times over the last few weeks. Elliotte wanted to include it naturally with training camps getting going and a number of players in the PTO situation. So what's the answer?
Basically, you get treated as if you're on the roster. So you get your per diem, you get access to the facility. You can have the meals that they prepare for the players, but it's as if you are on the roster for per diems and things like that. However, you're not under contract. The other thing people should remember about PTOs that they sometimes forget, and we sometimes forget, is, let's just say a player like Sammy Blais, he's on a PTO with Vancouver. He doesn't have to just sign with Vancouver. He can just sign with anybody.
Okay, let's go overseas now, Elliotte. Akseli, apologies if I got the pronunciation wrong, but Akseli from Hausjärvi in southern Finland. Hello, from the already dark Hausjärvi in southern Finland. My name's Akseli, and I have a question regarding European player drafts. I've heard that some Finnish junior teams or Liga teams that grow players get compensated when their players get drafted into the NHL. Is this true, and how does the money get decided? Is there some sums that get bigger when the player is drafted in the first round, or is it always the same? Huge thank you to the pod, to both of you, handsome hosts, and Dom.
Oh, I like this guy.
Hold on, he also adds, I love listening to it while playing NHL on Xbox, although my girlfriend doesn't like it because I can't hear what she says.
Well, I'd like to stay out of domestic disputes. I would like to say that. So I won't comment further.
So draft compensation then, Elliotte.
But first of all, I am glad that our guest, this is why I like Finns, because they recognize our handsomeness.
Yes.
This is why I'm a huge fan of the Finnish people. So I don't know the exact amounts because they've been renegotiated over time, and I don't know what they are right now. But yes, if a team gets a player drafted, then there is an amount that they get from the NHL. So honestly, I can't answer right now what the amounts are per round, but yes, there is. You are right about what you heard, and there is compensation, and that's why, for example, like some of these teams, like a 7th round pick might not mean a lot to us watching the draft, but they mean a lot to these teams. The difference between a player getting drafted and a player signing as a free agent down the road, it is money to the teams. And to be honest, in Russia, that was one of the big issues between Russia and the NHL over the transfer agreement is that Russia thought that the money that that they were getting paid for their players getting drafted was simply not enough for what they felt they were putting in terms of developing the players. So that was one of the big issues.
Okay, last one. Kevin from Elliotte City, Maryland. Hey guys, first off, so happy to have hockey and the podcast back up and rolling. I've been reading Ken Dryden's book and finding him to be such an interesting character. At times, I almost feel the story of his last season could be made into a movie, which got me thinking. What player or event in hockey would you guys want to see a movie made about? My mind goes to Slava Kozlov's time in the USSR and defecting to the U.S. Can't wait to hear your answers. Here's to many more years of 32 Thoughts. This is a fun one.
Well, one thing I would say, Kevin, is if you're interested in pieces like that, a few years ago at Sportsnet, they did a piece on Alexander Mogilny's defection to the Buffalo Sabres, and you can easily find that online. It's a beautifully done piece, and among the people that were interviewed, if I remember correctly, were Jerry Mean and Don Luce, who were very big in the Sabres organization in terms of helping Mogilny get to North America. So if you're looking for something like that, I would recommend that particular Sportsnet piece, not because I work for Sportsnet, but because it's actually a really, really well-done piece that I believe won some awards and deserve them. Boy, that's a great question. One of the first names that jumps to my mind is Mario Lemieux. Just think about everything he went through, the battles to come back, the returns from retirement. I would love to hear like some of the things he went through off the ice to get himself able to play, and also the negotiations that the money was owed to him from the Penguins and how he became an owner and how he ran that team, and Crosby staying with him early in his career. I think the Lemieux story would be really good, but I also think you try to think about some of the real characters of the game, whether now or back then. And I would say this, like, you think of some of the guys who played minor league hockey for as long as they did. I would love to hear the stories of people who played minor league hockey some guys played for like 20 years. Especially, you think about, we don't have as many of them anymore, but there were a lot of guys who fought in minor league hockey for 15 to 20 years. Like Dennis Bonvie, I think he's a scout now. Frank Bialowas.
Nasty Morasti.
It's a great name and a great nickname. I bet you some of the stories that they have about, playing hockey in so many minor leagues for so long, and they were beloved in their communities. Those would be the players I would really think of.
Yeah, and a reason why like that Untold documentary on the Danbury Trashers was so compelling for a lot of those reasons too. I'm going to go, so he said player or like event or team. I'm going to take the 2002 Team Canada, the Salt Lake Olympics. I would love a movie about how all of that unfolded.
That's a great one.
My generation, like that was our Summit Series, our 87 Canada Cup. Of course, there was even, some political tension between Canada and U.S. at the time. The fact that it was in the U.S., playing the Americans in the gold medal game, all the drama behind the Looney getting blown out by Sweden in the first game, the press conference by Wayne Gretzky, how tight the quarterfinal was against Finland, and then getting a layup with Sweden being upset by Belarus, playing them in the semifinals. And
that whole tournament,
so many good stories. Obviously, when you look at the roster that Canada fielded there, how many Hall of Famers and the all-time great players that all came together to capture that gold medal. I would love a little more storytelling and some sort of, whether it was a documentary or a movie, on that team and that tournament.
Tim Warnsby wrote a good book about it, but you're right. There is a documentary to be made there. The Lucky Looney, things like that. That's a good call.
All right. That was our latest.
Hold on 1 second. Before we go to the end,
okay.
I did get a note from someone about the future considerations question last time. They said that they basically said that, like, you were trying to be too careful and your answer wasn't very good. So basically, he said, and this is an executive in the league, future considerations means nothing. You really can't have a trade with nothing going the other way. So you have to say future considerations. But what he said was you kind of didn't explain it right enough that you can't have prearranged follow-on deals, so there's no actual future considerations. So future considerations is generally we're not giving you anything, but we can't say that.
Yes, and a great reminder of how poor a job you typically do at explaining things. The Thought Line, 1-833-311-3232, and 32 Thoughts at sportsnet.ca. Back to wrap from this SoCal edition of 32 Thoughts, the podcast, after this. Okay, before we get to our interview, we wanted to mention this past Monday, big event in Toronto.
Hold on a second. I just have one question for you.
Go ahead.
What is it that you travel with?
What do you mean coffee? I travel with? For my coffee?
Yeah, I just learned this.
You want to bring this up on the
yeah,
pod?
I think this is actually very interesting. I just learned like you're a huge coffee guy.
Well, no, you didn't just learn this because we talked about it. You chose not to remember.
I didn't remember until this morning that you were a big coffee guy.
Great. So I look forward to in February, you're like, hey, I want to ask you.
No, now that I brought it up on the pod, I will remember it.
Okay. So, I travel with what's called an AeroPress. They have a travel version of that for brewing the coffee. I travel with a scale to measure your water and coffee amounts because that's a big part of it. And also just a manual small grinder because grinding your beans fresh is a big part of getting the best flavor out of it.
So what is the ideal? I like my coffee, but I'm not like this. Okay. I'm not weird. So what I want to know is what is the ideal, when you measure it, water to beans, what is the ideal?
I think it's
balance?
Like a 16-to-1 ratio, I believe, for a typical pour over. I could be way off with that. But I believe it's around 16-to-1. It can vary depending on what type of roast the coffee is. And a lot of that stuff I don't know about. I'm still very much learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like I have 8 cups a day. I'm 1, maybe 2 max. But I just love the art behind it, the process of making it. I know a lot of people listening to, why would you just go down to the lobby and get a coffee?
No.
You totally could, but I enjoy the process of it. And what's great, getting a chance to travel throughout the year. I mean, sometimes I'll just bring some coffee beans from home, but getting to go to different roasteries wherever we are on the road, bringing it back home and also trying it in the hotel.
So I'm trying to get you an endorsement here. So I want 25% if this works.
If you can land it, you got it.
What is the best?
Are you Kevin O'Leary now? You're so we're on Shark Tank?
That's right. I'm trying to help you here, okay?
Yeah.
Where's the best cup of coffee in the NHL?
Man, there's a place in Denver called Corvus.
Yeah.
They do a really good job. That's up there. There was a place in New York called Everyman Espresso. I'm not sure if it's still there,
okay,
but I remember that knocked my socks off the first time. In Canada, we're very lucky. There's a number of good spots. September Coffee in Ottawa locally, just because I'm there and I've had a chance to try it a few times. That one really stands out. The other one I should mention too, in Toronto, Sam James Coffee Bar. They've got a really good thing going there. I actually had a chance to go visit their headquarters, see the roastery and all that, meet Sam, a really bright mind in the coffee world and does a lot for the other cafes and roasters in the area. Wanted to mention them as well. But there's a ton. The coffee community, Elliotte, you would be blown away.
No, I wouldn't. I've actually heard about this.
Okay. Nothing surprises you.
No. That's actually a very good imitation, but I'm not surprised. I actually have heard that you're not the only person. You're not the only weirdo like this.
No, the big coffee expos every year. I believe last year it was in Chicago. It is a massive, massive job that they put on. I don't know if it's quite Comic-Con levels, but there's a lot of people that go to it. All right. So let's get back to what we were doing initially before this detour. So Monday, Elliotte.
Yes.
Amazon, the big premiere or big unveiling of their broadcast team for their Monday night games this season in Canada, and also a little more insight into what they are calling Face Off Inside the NHL, a 6-part docuseries that drops on October the 4th. The first look at the trailer was dropped this week, too. First off, were you at the event?
No, because I was at a charity event in Montreal.
That's right. But they had William Nylander on stage talking about it, and even just the trailer alone, a lot of people are reacting to Connor McDavid in the room, but we have the audio of William Nylander on the bench against Boston.
Yep.
Stop crying, bro. What was your thoughts when you saw all of this rolled out?
Well, we've talked about this a little bit about what we'd heard was coming, and I don't think anybody was disappointed by what they saw at the premiere event. Bill Daly came on in Vegas and talked about how teams didn't have any control over it. I heard, subsequent to when we talked about it, I heard that most teams were actually really good. Like a lot of the teams, as a matter of fact, a couple teams actually reached out to say to me that we noted that most teams were actually pretty good, because I've written about this before, but Gary Bettman sent out a memo to the teams last December, in December of 2023. There had been some refusal to wear mics, and he said that the future of our league depends on cooperation with this kind of thing. So most of the teams said they really got the message and they didn't interfere. The other thing I really heard was that people were kind of blown away by how the players were accepting of it.
Yes.
Nylander, I saw the interview we did that day where he said, look, I watch these kinds of shows, so I was happy to participate. But I think they were really blown away by how much players like McDavid were willing to do it, and several of the other players were willing to do it. And from what I understand, the players put up almost no fight at all in terms of what it was. And, it's interesting. I saw McDavid's interview this week where he said, I really didn't want to become the star of this, but I did hear there was a McDavid scene that a lot of people, specifically I think the people at Amazon, were very excited for people to see. And I don't think it was the one when they lost. I think it was that one. It was clearly that one. And, people, the thing about McDavid is, and I've said this before, I think the guy is a killer. I think he really wants to win. I think he really wants to beat people. And I think if there's anybody who has a question about his willingness to win, it's going to be over once they see this full scene. But, again, as someone who works in the business, Kyle, I admit it frustrates me that it's not us doing this, that we have to credit Amazon, because I would love all this stuff to air all over Sportsnet. But look, this is where we're going. And, we always say the NHL has to do more and do more and do more. And it's very clear here that they recognize the time has come and they're going to. And I hope this is only the beginning of a league where they recognize that this is what has to be done and we have to push our lines even more. The interesting thing about it is, when that happened on the Maple Leafs bench in the playoff series, before the next game, we reported what happened on Sportsnet. And at the time, no one would talk about it. They wouldn't admit it. It turned out we were exactly right about what happened. The face-off play had crumbled. We didn't have the exact words. And this week, I got a call from someone who said, one of the things that kind of happened when everybody was working on that was there was a lot of talk about how much more valuable it would be for the Amazon series if nobody confirmed what happened, so that we could, quote unquote, break it on the Amazon series at this point of the year. So, like, for example, when the Oilers put out that clip of the after Game 7,
yes, in the room,
I don't think everybody was very happy about that, because they're they really wanted to push the breaking of these behind-the-scene moments to Amazon. They valued the relationship with Amazon. So it was funny. This guy was saying to me, as all the discourse was going on about that Maple Leaf face-off play, they were kind of like, okay, I know these guys have to ask about it, but we really have to make sure that the most valuable stuff is saved for this piece.
Yeah.
So it's just another example of, even though Amazon's doing a documentary and we're kind of in the news business, it's all competition. All competition.
Right. And in fairness to the Oilers, their production team, I mean, they had been giving behind the scenes snippets all throughout the playoffs, right? It's not like that came out of nowhere.
Yes.
But I understand where the Amazon was coming from. I also like what Quinn Hughes said this week, too, where he's going, naturally, I'm a pretty private guy. I wasn't totally comfortable. But when you see the other stars, the other big names that had signed on to do this, he kind of felt, well, who am I to say no to all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Because, as you say, as great as it could be conceptually to have the idea to do this, if you don't have the player buy-in, it goes nowhere. And clearly, just from the brief trailer that's been out there, they got it.
Well, that's a captain, the Hughes. I give him credit for that, recognizing that. I will tell you this, periodically at Sportsnet, they have talked about doing that for our Saturday night show, like a behind-the-scenes show.
Really?
Yes. They have come to us before and asked us about the possibility of doing it. And in my case, I was concerned about two things. Number one, I wouldn't want any of the phone calls I do with people around the league.
Oh, following all around
us.
in the okay, sorry. I gotcha. Okay.
Like I said, my concern was like I wouldn't want any audio or the ability to know who I was talking to because you don't want sources revealed. And like to be honest, I was concerned about how everybody would react to the way like people like Kevin and I talk to each other. But I think it's only like a matter of time before that starts happening in the TV business too, where it's not only about, what you're doing on the air, but it's about what you're doing off the air.
That would be phenomenal.
Our pickleball match yesterday.
Can you imagine? That would be the least rated show of the whole series.
Thank God that beatdown didn't get recorded.
Yeah, that's right.
Kyle with the coffee grinders, Tom says. Oh, here's Kyle making his coffee.
My goodness. Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shock, really, that this show hasn't come to life yet. Just think of the possibilities they have, the great personalities they can follow around. Let's get to our interview, shall we, Elliotte?
Absolutely.
So earlier on Thursday, we were out at the Toyota Sports Performance Center, the LA Kings practice facility. Really need to be able to spend some time around the team as their group takes shape as the preseason rolls on here. Got a chance to sit down with Jim Hiller, the head coach of the Kings. 22 years he's been in the coaching business, has lived quite an interesting life in hockey. We'll get into his background, the vision he sees for the Kings going forward. The pride of Port Alberni, BC, the head coach of the Kings, Jim Hiller. Our conversation with him. Enjoy. Jim Hiller, the head coach of the LA Kings, joins us here now. Jim, great for you to join us. Welcome to the podcast. You've lived a pretty interesting life in hockey, and you've been around it a long time, been a lot of different places. I guess we'll just start with that. I mean, when you think back to how you ended up here ultimately as head coach of the Kings, where does your mind first go to?
Oh, well, you know what? Honestly, it goes to probably sitting on my couch watching hockey with my dad, watching Wayne Gretzky play for the Oilers, and then Wayne Gretzky being traded from the Oilers to the Kings. And I think it was maybe 4 or 5 weeks after that, I was I think you'd have to correct me on the date. I either got drafted by the Kings, yes, first, and then Gretzky got traded to the Kings.
Yes.
And then I got to play with the Kings. And I think a lot of times the first, players move around in hockey, but the team that drafts you and the first team you play for you, it has a special place for you. So now to come all the way back and be the head coach of the Kings is pretty special because the Kings were always, in a sense, my team. They always felt like that. So that's the loop. It was always watching Wayne Gretzky play and then getting a chance to get drafted and play for the team he played with and now coach the team. And I don't know who it was. Somebody told me before in a press conference how many players who played their first game and coached their first game head coach for that same team. Not that many in NHL history.
Well, let's take this story a bit further because your first camp, weren't you on Gretzky's line?
I was, yeah. Barry Melrose was the coach, and shout out to him. Had a pretty good impact on me. And when I came in, he put me right away with Wayne and said, "Relax, just play. That's where I got you slotted in." And thrill of a lifetime. 5 or 6 days before he left with an injury, I had to get his back worked on. Training camp days, go. Those training camp games were, unfortunately, probably the highlight of my career.
I mean, I would have I don't know if I can use this phrase, but I would have bleed bricks if I was a rookie at my first camp and they said you're going to be Wayne Gretzky's winger.
Yeah.
Like, how did you handle it? You mentioned watching with your. Did you call your dad and say you're never going to guess who I'm playing with?
No, I don't remember exactly, but I remember for whatever reason it should have been. I wasn't intimidated. I was just so excited, and probably was, probably should have been more excited as my career went on. But that week or whatever it ended up being, was just some of the most exciting hockey or time in my life as a hockey player.
And then your last year pro, you were over in Italy, right? With Milan. Like, what was pro hockey in Italy like in the early 2000s?
Right. I had played 5 years in Germany before that. Yeah. And my good buddy who I played college with was in Italy. And so I thought I'd play for one more year. So I went over there and played with him. And it was great. What an experience, because, the hockey in Italy, in Europe in itself is one thing, but we lived in Milan, and just the chaos of that city. I think that was really the thing I'll remember most.
Tell us about it. What was the chaos?
Well, it's just Germany was very well, organized. The city, and Italy was just a little more free flowing. So I was talking about today, you just kind of parked your car where you wanted to park your car at that time. And there was no such thing as parking spots. I remember going to the soccer game at San Siro, watching AC Milan, and just cars everywhere. You just pulled up and parked your car, and you were boxed in, so you would have to wait for the other people to come before you would leave. And so it was just that kind of thing. It was just very free-flowing. Wasn't used to that.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was the quality of play when you were there?
Yeah. No, there wasn't a high quality of play. No, it was not. But I played again with my buddy Scott Beattie and Patrice Lefebvre. The three of us were aligned. Remember Patrice Lefebvre, that name? Mm-hmm. What a scorer. What a player. Mm-hmm. So, we probably had more experience than most players in the league. We had a pretty good line. So it was fun to play. We scored a few goals.
Right after that, you basically jumped right into coaching. So where along the way did that bugs first start to grab you? How did it all come about?
Well, you know what it did? When I played college, Northern Michigan University, we had a team that was pretty good. We were an older team, and we ended up winning a national championship in 91. And I just kind of saw how kind of an impact the coaches could have on our team. None of us were high-end players by any means. There were way more talented teams, and we just had a special bond with the players. I thought the coaches did a good job. It really made an impact on me on what kind of an impact the coach could have on a team. And so at that point, I thought, you know what? I think I'd like to do this when I'm finished playing. So I got an early start on it as far as when I was playing pro and bouncing around. Just kind of, would I do this? This worked. You talk to your teammates. Did you like that? What would you do different? So you do get a little bit of a background on the player's perspective of the coach.
So who was your coach on that national championship team?
It was Rick Comley.
And what did he do well? Like what did you say?
I don't know. He was a disciplinarian. He was very strict. At that time he could be more like that. Mm-hmm. And I just think the players had a lot of respect, not only for him. We had Walt Kyle and Maury Gary were two other coaches on that team. I think the players just had a lot of respect and belief and trust in the coaching staff. And I think we just worked together. It just worked. We ended up winning. And so how do you win when you're not supposed to win? You got to have good players, but you got to have good coaches too. So the whole thing worked. I thought he did a good job of establishing discipline, but still letting us have fun.
Okay. Every year it comes with the challenges and things you prepare for. We're talking on Friday morning. Mm-hmm. Thursday night, you're in Vegas, and 2 shifts into the game, your number one defenseman gets hurt. Like, how does it throw everything into like a spinner?
Well, you don't like to see that happen to anybody. First of all, your team or anybody else's. But Drew is such a competitor. I know we talked about him earlier this week, and he's just the ultimate hockey player, Drew. When you think about hockey, you think about Drew Doughty. He's competitive. He loves it. He's passionate about the sports. He loves his teammates. And the thing I'll remember most from that moment when he went off is, and I kind of looked down and I just caught it down our bench, and I saw some of our veteran players actually banging their stick against the boards in frustration when he left the ice. And this just goes to show you the respect they have for him. And they knew, he's out. It doesn't look good. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to miss him. We're going to miss him in a lot of ways, not just on the ice, but he's a true leader of the team. one of the true leaders of the team. And yeah, so we'll regroup and we'll take it from there. But sad to see.
So do you address the team about it, like at the rink the next morning, giving his presence and the role that he plays in all of this here? Or how do you go about the next day?
Right. No, I just talked to a couple of our other, veteran defensemen, and if Drew's not going to be around, who knows, for a while, then what does that require from you guys? Not just on the ice, but off the ice. There'll be a void in leadership, and some other guys can step up and fill that void.
Well, it's one thing I remember. One of the first coaches I dealt with, his line was always, no matter how good someone is, one person's injury is another person's opportunity. Yeah. And that's the only thing you can do as a coach. Even if it's one of your star players, you have to convince other players that it is their chance to do the job.
And there's been so many examples over time in every sport where somebody's gone out. It doesn't always work this way, but somebody gets their opportunity and rises. I think of Tom Brady, first of all. Now, we're not talking that level, but somebody does. Somebody gets the opportunity. They don't always take it to that degree. And in our case, there will be more opportunity for sure. And I think we have guys that are ready for that and can fill some of that void. Not all of it, for sure. We've got an idea who that might be, but let's see. It might be somebody else that might surprise us.
So what I just heard is that Brant Clark is Tom Brady. That's what I just heard.
Yeah. You guys. Well, we'll see. We'll see if it's Brant, but it could be others.
Yeah.
If you think about the right side, Jordan Spence, Kyle Burrows played 25 minutes in that game. So we've got other opportunities, and then there's other guys that can play the right side who are left shots. We got to sort that out, though. There's no question.
So one of the things that you kind of addressed it there is that there's certain things in the LA organization that are constants, no matter what's happened the last 15 years. The calmness of Anze Kopitar and the laugh of Drew Doughty.
Yeah.
And one of the things I know you guys have kind of addressed is you kind of thought you had a calm, quiet team, and you wanted to make it a little bit louder and a little bit more boisterous. And that's what a guy like Tanner Jeannot does. How do you deal with, not necessarily off on the ice, but just Drew off the ice?
Oh, I have a great relationship. I like talking to Drew because Drew, again, you just think we're all in this game of hockey because we love it. And Drew is one of those guys that loves it as much or more than anybody I've ever been around. So he'll talk about the game. He'll talk about his teammates. What do you need from me? He's just all in. He just wants to win. And I think that's him and Kopi together just want to win. I know everybody wants to win, but they want to win and they have won. And it's, for me, as a coach, to be around those guys in that way, it's really helpful because you just know the message. You just know what their ultimate goal is. It's not about anything else but winning.
What's it been like for you waiting for a head coaching opportunity in the NHL?
I've enjoyed it. I had hoped that I would have got, maybe more opportunity sooner, like everybody always does. You think you're ready and you're waiting for your opportunity. But what do? You just try to put your head down and do the best job you can and continue to build your resume and hope that at some point you do get your chance. And, nobody likes to take over from a friend. And Todd, brought me in, an excellent coach, a great person. Nobody likes those circumstances, but we know how the game works. So when your name is called, you just got to go and try and do the best you can. I've really enjoyed it. I didn't know, if it would go beyond last season. I'm glad it did, of course. Really enjoyed the end of that last year, but I'm really enjoying this. We've got more time. We've been able to, plan practice and execute and think about systems and all those kinds of things. Really enjoyed getting prepared for this season.
One of the hardest things that any coach has, they've told me, is going from an assistant coach on a team to the head coach on a team, because players, like when you're assistant coach, a lot of the time you're the good cop. And when you have to switch to being the bad cop, like players can smell phoniness from a mile away. How did you manage that?
Well, that's right. I think it's a great challenge. I think you framed that really well. I think you have to be authentic, and I think you could be authentic as an assistant coach if whatever your role is. But then when you make that leap, you just have to be who you are. And the guys know who you are. So if you try to be something different, they'll know that that's not you. So, of course, you got to carry a heavier hand at times. That comes with the territory. But I still think, they got to know the person, that the person's being authentic. Then I think everybody's able to accept that. And for me, like I said, I just go back to Kopi and Drew specifically. They set the tone for the team. And when I came in, they supported me and have supported me. And once your leaders follow, you get the support from your leaders, the other guys typically follow.
So one of the stories I kind of heard was early in your time, there was a 7-0 loss in Buffalo. And that was a challenge because you had to address them. And someone said to me that was a big meeting because and I know you're never going to tell me who you said what to, but I just heard that you made it clear that whether you were a star player or you were the 20th guy on the roster, that was not going to be acceptable. What can you tell us about that meeting that you can share?
Not much.
See, that's no fun. It's definitely
exactly.
not the answer I'm looking for.
You shouldn't have brought me on. So, you know how it works. I mean, we had our first game. Edmonton came in. They were playing well. We played a good game. We got some great goaltending that night. We beat the Oilers. It was a great night for our team because we had been struggling. So then you go to the next game, and we lose 7-0. So, as a coach, you hope you get a little more runway than game 2, losing 7-0. And obviously losing 7-0 is unacceptable. So, we had to have a meeting and just make sure that everybody was clear on what, the standard was going to be and the approach was going to be. And if we didn't play well, what the response from the coach was going to be. And, like I said, I would have liked a little more runway, but it was put on the fire at that moment. And so we addressed what we thought the standard would be and what the tone of that sounded like.
So when did you start to feel that okay, we're going to be okay here once you took over?
Well, I was looking forward to the next game was against Jersey.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to how we might respond to that game. And, it was a big game for us. The other point and thing you have to remember is how important every point was for us at that point. So we couldn't have afforded to get mad at the coach or be frustrated and lose 2 or 3 games in a row early. We had to get some momentum. And so as great as it was to beat the Oilers and lousy as it was to lose to Buffalo like that, we had to get ourselves back going again. We went out and played a great first period in Jersey and then continued on through the game, won late. I think Quentin scored late on the power play, won the game, went into Boston, beat them, went into Pittsburgh, beat them. So we got ourselves going with some momentum again. We got home and I think we felt pretty good about that at that point.
Okay. So, I always want to talk about, who you learned from. You talked about your college coach, but I'm curious. We talked briefly about that meeting after the 7-0 game. What was the game in your career that you never saw a coach lose it on a team that you played for, or even you coached with?
Oh, good. That's a really good question. That is a good question. Because I know oftentimes as players, you interpret it in different ways. Not always the way the coach intends the meeting to go. You kind of interpret it differently sometimes as players. Like, wow, this guy lost it tonight. But I don't know. There's not one that jumps into my head. And there could be one, but I'm not going to share. But good question. Let's leave it at that. Good question.
I get a sense we're leaving a lot of good stuff on the cutting room floor.
Good question. Yeah, good question. We'll give you some. We're not giving you everything. Well, okay. We'll save some.
So let me go with this one. I have heard that one of the people that you really credit a lot is Jacques Lemaire. So what did Jacques Lemaire teach you about coaching that you do?
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't compare myself to Jacques. I think if I took anything from Jacques, or the biggest thing from Jacques is just that the game is simple, the simplicity of the game, to make sure it's very clear to the players, but not to overcomplicate it. Everybody has to work hard. You have to be on the defensive side of the puck to give yourself a chance. And just not, I guess I would come back to it again, just not overcomplicating it. Just the players are tremendous athletes, smart players. Give them the structure, hold them accountable to it, but just make sure that they're not overthinking, that they can play within it. Because the last thing you want to do is slow anybody down. It happens so fast out there. So, hopefully I've tried to do that. I know we all like to think, we can do this better and that and all these different things, but try to always keep the player in mind and try to help the player get better.
You mentioned your authenticity as a coach and in dealing with young players. I feel for years now we've heard about, well, it's different. Like you can't yell at them. There's got to be a why. There's a certain level of communication that's been out there. But also young players now, I feel like they've got a lot more leverage than maybe they've ever had before. So what's it like as a coach now in dealing with the new wave of players each year and how you go about connecting with them?
Well, I mean, a pretty standard answer. I think that you have to communicate with them more than you ever have. But I also believe you have to communicate with them on their level. And their level is social media. Not that I'm a social media guy, but their music, their social media, what they're watching, not necessarily on TV, but on YouTube. The UFC is popular. So some of the things that are important to them, to let them know that you're kind of with them. It's not just this coach-player relationship where it just ends there. I think, they probably have less. If I want to talk to them about what I'm doing in my life, it's probably not that interesting. But with what's going on with their life, I think if you can have some common ground there, that makes a difference. I'll take Quentin Byfield as an example, because through my kids, I love the Kid Leroy. He's phenomenal, the artist, the Kid Leroy. And so I went playing it in the dressing room here, and I wasn't getting a lot of love from the boys with the Kid Leroy when I came in here. But Quentin is a Kid Leroy fan. So him and I connect on the Kid Leroy. Yeah. And so I think I went to his concert this summer. We're going to try to get him to come down to a Kings game. And I know he's talked about Quentin. I talked to him about Quentin. And those kind of things where it's just a little bit more personal. You find common ground. And
that's
the younger
awesome.
player, I think it's important.
Yeah. Do you lean on your kids at all for?
Oh yeah, listen, I didn't find out the Kid Leroy on my own.
Yeah.
My kids definitely. I have 19 and 23-year-old boys, so kind of in the sweet spot.
Okay. By the way, you look like you could compete in the UFC too, Jim.
Yeah. Well, we got Berger. I got to keep up with Berger in some way. Nobody can ever keep up with Berger.
Mark Bergevin, he's in great shape.
Yeah, Berger's in great shape.
Let's. A bit more on that. Like, you're turning over your team a little bit this year. Like, the goal is for Byfield to take even more of a role. Mentioned Brant Clark. We've got Jordan Spence, Turcotte, Akil Thomas. So the goals for the Kings are, like, you've made the playoffs 3 years in a row. You never want to go backwards, but you're putting some new young guys into some big spots here.
Yeah.
So how do you get them in there, but also let them know the standard cannot slip even a little bit?
Well, again, I'll just go back to the culture, and you probably got to go all the way back to the early 2000s or 2010s, where they were building to win a Stanley Cup, and Trevor Lewis was there, Kopi and Drew were there. So you have that's been ingrained in the Kings system, and you can never lose that. And the beauty of those veteran players is they live that. So when you're coming up as a younger player, you just see that. And I think that's, going to carry the franchise through for so many years forward, as you've got these younger players. If we use Quentin as an example, to come in behind, and, you could see Quentin being here for the next 15 years and carrying that torch. Long-time Kings who have learned about what winning's like, winning Stanley Cups from some of the greatest players that have played in their generation here in town. So that standard has to be kept. It's not an option. It just has to be. And I think the players have bought into that. They respect our leaders, and I don't think that will ever change.
I have a couple of names I want to ask you about. Lou Lamoriello.
Oh, love him. He won't be listening. Lou doesn't listen to this stuff, but I'll tell you what. No,
that's why he's so sane.
So much respect for Lou. He's helped me so much. Of course, I spent 3 years with him in Toronto, 3 years with the Island. And you talk also about a mentor, and in so many ways. Just a gentleman.
Give a lesson.
You want some more, Elliotte?
No, I do. Of course I want
I don't
more.
know who you would hear from first, me or Lou? Would hear from you or from me?
No. Believe me, if I ever do anything bad, I'll get a call from him. But
I don't want to get a call from him.
No, but there has to be something you've seen, the way he does things or the way he approaches things, that he would smile if he heard.
Yeah, no. Well, listen, I'll just say two things. Lou just wants to win. he just wants to win. Nothing else matters, as you know. And he will take care of every detail to help you make that happen. He's just all in on winning and every detail, the no stone unturned.
Okay. Mike Babcock.
Gave me my chance, and I respect him for that. I was a junior coach, and he was, on the cusp of the Olympics and all those kinds of things. And he took a chance on me to give me my first job. I respect him for that. And he gave me my chance, and I'll remember that. And hopefully there's a day I can give a young coach a chance too.
DJ Smith.
Oh my gosh. DJ Smith. Yeah. DJ makes me laugh. Anybody who's been around DJ knows that, within 2 or 3 minutes, never 2 or 3 minutes long without you laughing. He's just a fun-loving guy, loves hockey, loves life. And he's taught me a lot about hockey. He's taught me a lot about hockey play without the puck. I think he's got a tremendous mind for the game without the puck in particular. And I've learned a lot from him.
Well, I was going to follow up on DJ because I remember when you were two on the bench in Toronto, particularly on the road after the morning skate, all of a sudden you'd hear the weights clanking up and down off the ground because you two were getting a workout in. Like, how competitive are the two of you when it comes to those sort of things?
No, we're back at it. We took a break. Well, you know what? We don't clank the weights around anymore. You might hear the rower going or the bike anymore. Right. The weights aren't getting clanked around.
Lower impact
as we get older. Yeah, exactly. No, but he's good for me that way too. We push each other, enjoy each other's company. It's just a good guy to have around. But again, a really good coach, and that's first and foremost, why he's here.
I want to ask you about a couple of your opponents, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. You've sure seen enough of them the last.
This is tough,
years.
Elliotte? You didn't. I should need a list of these questions before I agree to this next time. Well, what can you say that hasn't already been said?
Mm-hmm.
Two great players. To watch them from ice level, you know what I mean? You get a better appreciation from them. But two guys that we got to beat.
Yeah. Playing the same team 3 years in a row in the playoffs, what has that taught you going through all of that?
I don't know. I don't know that it's taught us anything. It's taught us that we need to be better, whether it was them or anybody else. We didn't get past the first round. So I think it's taught our organization that we're not good enough and we have to get better. And what does that look like? And we feel like, adding younger players, but we don't feel like that means we're not going to be better. Younger players in bigger roles. The only way they're going to get bigger roles is if they can make us better. And so that's the whole point of this is to win. And you want to develop your players, but they have to be ready for the roles that they take on. And we feel like some of these young guys are ready to take bigger steps. What does that look like? We don't know yet. It's only training camp, but we feel like, we're set up pretty good going forward.
I spoke to a coach once who was an interim once, and he was he had a chance to become the head coach after being an interim. And he said one of the toughest things he ever went through professionally was the weight. Like, he believed he was right and he believed he could do a good job. But in that position, it's always hard to tell how the team feels, right? Yeah. And I just want, between the end of last season and the time that Rob said that you were going to be the head coach, just, you've waited for this opportunity for so long. Like, how challenging was that for you?
It wasn't that bad. And I'm going to tell you why. We had a 34-game run and we had a short playoffs, but I felt like, given the circumstances, we came in and we did a good job. And I would have liked to have done a better job. I don't know how I could have. You would like to change some things in retrospect, but I felt like we did a good job. Gave them a vision for what we thought the future of the team would look like, how it would play, who would play where, kind of what we were thinking. And then, as much as you want it and you think that's enough, you can't do anymore. That's just really the way I approached it. They got to see me work. We got to have our relationships. You decide. If you don't think I'm the right guy for it at this point, then for me, it's, as disappointed as I would be, then I wasn't the right guy. I think it's different than sometimes if you just go in an interview, you don't know each other that well. Here's my plan. Here's my video. And, there's probably bigger variance of what that's going to turn out like, because we were here and they saw us work. the upside or downside is probably limited. You have a better idea of what you're getting from your coach. And so I thought, yeah, you saw me work. If you think that's right for us, then let's go forward. If not, there's not much else I can do.
That's a great attitude. The other thing that people said to me was you were one of the first coaches to really embrace analytics.
That word, yeah.
I don't think it necessarily has to be like a bad word, but like a lot, because all the coaches have to do it now. Yeah. But the people said to me, like, Jim was one of the first. He really understood it. There were times some of us looked at him like, I don't want to hear this. But now I think people would say that you were ahead of the curve than a lot of other guys were.
Well, I don't know about that. And maybe, I don't know who would say that, but I look at it differently. I have going way back, we, Brad Warenka and I were, back when I was in junior, we were talking about looking at the game differently. And the way we did it, and we kind of put a system together, was watching the game and then watching moments in the game and understanding where, is that what most NHLers would do? Or is that maybe a little bit above? Did they create an advantage with what they did with their moment, and offensively and defensively? Or did they create a disadvantage? And so we looked at it that way, and then started to assign our own values to those plays. So when you talk about analytics, sometimes you bring a bunch of information and you try to make sense of the information. What we thought we were doing back then is looking at the video and putting the sense into the video in the front end, rather than trying to make sense of it in the back end. And using hockey sense and commonplace terms that players would, or coaches and players would talk about, looking at it from a coach's and a player's perspective. So anyways, that was kind of the background, and, that's gone on to do different things. My son's involved with that now on his own, and has his own little business going that way.
Let's plug it. What's it called?
No, he's just on his own. He's quiet in the back. Yeah, there's no need for plugs, anything like that. He's just doing a good job. Yeah, no, he's carrying on, and he's talking to players and managers around the league, and he's doing well. So it's nothing to plug, but I only say it because you mentioned analytics. I just tell you it's a different way to think about the game, not just analytics. It's creating your own values, and then you can look at numbers after that, but it's looking at it first.
Okay, I'm going to dig down on this because I think this is really interesting.
Yeah, I know. I'm not taking it any further. Go ahead. No, try me.
Do you still, the system that you created with Brad Warenka, who I remember from the Canadian Olympic team, do you still use that today?
Do I personally? No, my son's involved with it, but
no. But do you still think about it?
No, I think about the game that way.
Okay,
maybe it's a better way to say it. I look at the game and think about the game that way.
Yeah. But I find this really fascinating. So take me back then. Give me an example. Like, how would you? I'm actually really curious about this. Like, how would you score a play? Like, if you made a play or Brad Warenka made a play and you went back and looked at it, like, can you explain to me how you would score it? Because I remember one time, like, Scotty Bowman was good enough to tell me these are the kinds of things that I kept track of. I kept track of who won a puck battle, who won a race to the puck, and I would give a plus or a minus to a player based on that. So what I would like to know is, how did you score it based on what you were watching? I find this stuff really fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is actually interesting. Some people do, some people don't. Again, but Brad and I, during that time, had lots of conversations, some of them arguments going back and forth, because we always thought that the offense had to balance the defense, because it's a zero-sum game in the end. You can make a good play, but if you make a bad play, those two could wash out, unless you make a really good play and just not quite such a bad play. Now you can end up on the positive side of the ledger. So again, I'm not here for that. I'm not going to take it any further than that, Elliotte. We can talk later if you want, but no, it's just a way to think about the game. And then, you can, through discussion with different people, you can say, what would you value that? Both good and bad. And then you start to build a consensus and build a system.
You're like Captain America with a shield, man. Like, all my questions, you're knocking them into the corner.
No. But we're not here to talk about that. But I'm really happy and proud of my son. He's doing a really good job.
What's his name?
Talon.
Okay.
Maybe you can talk to him someday.
Yeah, I would love to.
He can fill you.
I would love to.
I'm surprised we've gotten this far without talking the 131, Jim.
There it is. Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah. Geez, well, should have saved that for Elliotte. He's coming with everything else.
That's right. I couldn't let him have all the fun. No, because I was just going to ask Jim, I mean, how do you hope the LA Kings look this year in terms of how they play? What's your vision this season?
Well, I would say this. The 1-3-1 is a really good system of style of play to play. It's very difficult. It's frustrating for the opposition. I think it's really helped our franchise get back maybe quicker than people thought into playoff contention and getting, back into the thick of it as far as, winning again. For us, we just felt it was time to give our players something different. We think the strength of our team is our speed up front. Our players can really skate. And I think, what we're doing this year, changing things a little bit, not just in the neutral zone, but the neutral zone and the breakouts really work together. So they kind of go hand in hand. So we felt like if we can tweak this a little bit, we can tweak this, and maybe we can just allow our forwards to use their assets to skate just a little bit more and maybe make us a little bit more dangerous offensively.
Okay. Give us a player who started strong this year that you looked at camp and said, you know what? We challenged this guy a bit, and I like the way he started.
Well, there's a number of them. But I will say this: I want to give this player credit, and I will mention Brant Clark, because last year he came in, I think, probably with the expectation to make the hockey team. He had a great junior career, and he played for a while. He ended up going to the minors. He had a terrific year in the minors, an all-star. He played some games for us last year and did a pretty good job until some of the things, showed that maybe he wasn't quite ready for the NHL yet. Had to go back to the minors, did very well for them. And now he's come in here, I think, just maybe, I don't know what the word is, just to maybe a little bit more relaxed, just settled into pro hockey, settling into not having to look like the best player on the ice every time he's on the ice, because he's had that ability his whole young career. And he's with Joel Edmondson. They've played together since the beginning of camp, and I'm sure he's had some kind of effect. He's just got a real calmness to his game now. He's a terrific offensive player, sees the ice very well. But he's defending as well as we've ever seen him. I don't know if we could have imagined that he'd defend this well, play this much attention to detailed defending. I'm sure Eddie's had some influence on that. So that's the one player, and it's early. We're just getting started, but you just love to see the growth in players, especially young players, with that kind of talent.
Last one for me then. You touched on it there, the growth of players. Is that the most rewarding part of coaching for you, or what would it be? You couldn't even name one. You couldn't name three. There's so many. All that when you see players come back and they're better, when you see them, Quentin scored his 20th goal the last game of the year last year. That's exciting for him. The guys in the dressing room after, how excited they were for him. When you see Kopi score the overtime goal in Game 2 in Edmonton. There's so many moments that are rewarding, and you see the guys celebrating with each other, or even at times disappointed. That's part of the whole thing. True. It's like you get to be part of the journey as the coach, and those guys are out there laying it on the line. They do the work, and you get to be part of them and part of them, ride that emotional roller coaster, have the laughs, enjoy the laughs with them at the same time, listen to the music, complain about things, all these things. You get to be part of the team still as a coach. And, those moments are always the best part of it.
Great. Last question for me is your championship team in college. What was the one thing that team had that this Kings team will need to develop to win?
Well, I think it's probably, I would say, with any team. Everybody has a certain level of talent, but the tighter you become as a team, in the end, you have to be a team to win. We all know it. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but in every year you are a team, but there are just some years, for whatever reasons, personalities, because every team is different from year to year. The team has a new spirit from one year to the next, and the spirit has to grow. In some years, a spirit just takes hold, and all of a sudden you're like, how did we get here? That's what we have to do this year. Our spirit has to rise above where it's been in the last while.
Right. We look forward to watching. Thanks so much, Jim. Appreciate you coming by.
Guys.
I'm going to try to come up with a bunch more questions you refuse to answer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Jim. So a big thank you to Jim Hiller, Sean May, and the LA Kings. The whole organization have been so great in having us around, hosting us for a few days. More content from LA to come in future episodes. We actually did an interview on Thursday with Quentin Byfield as well. That's going to drop as part of Monday's episode. Until then, though, have a great weekend. And I should mention, as this pod drops on Friday, happy birthday, Elliotte Friedman. Be sure to send him a note.
I really thought I was going to get away with
Not
this.
a chance. Not a chance. Happy birthday, my friend. We appreciate you spending the day with us. Everybody, have yourselves a great weekend. We'll talk to you again on Monday.